Mr. Brown, who you claim is your 2-month-old fraternal twins, Chloe and Carter's biological fathers. The only reason Miss Mayo is claiming you're the father is because she's trying to trap you and she's desperate to be with you.
Before I even had them, I have bought, Mr. Brown, I have bought not one thing that you can think of. Everything came out of my pocket or my mom or my dad.
Not one thing?
Not one thing.
Why is that?
Because I don't believe they my children. For one, I feel like she trapped me.
I never trapped you. How did I trap you? Putting on a show. Before any of this happened, we was friends. I was doing stuff for you. You was doing stuff for me and my kids. Wrong or right?
Right.
Say if it was Monday. If I didn't see him Monday, I knew for a fact I was going to see him Tuesday. Right. From the first night when we had sex, we didn't use a condom. Every day we had sex, we never used a condom.
And she ain't see me Tuesday, that's a whole gap.
You right, but at the same time, I was talking to no one but you, and you know that.
So you
unprotected sex.
All right.
Time, not one time did we use a condom.
And so
sometimes one truth can rebuild a life or destroy it. When science meets emotion and justice meets heartbreak, the courtroom becomes more than a stage for facts. It becomes a mirror of human choices, love, and regret. Judge Lauren Lake has seen it all. The denials, the confessions, the silence before the verdict, and the tears that follow when the DNA test results finally appear. Because in her courtroom, truth changes everything. There's something hauntingly universal about the sound of a DNA envelope being opened. It's a quiet sound, paper brushing against paper, but in that moment, every heartbeat in the room sinks to its rhythm. For some, it's salvation. For others, it's a sentence. And for all who watch, it's a reminder that justice is never as simple as proof. The courtroom under Judge Lauren Lake isn't just a place where paternity is determined. It's a crossroads between law and emotion, a living study in the relationship between law and justice. People walk in hoping for closure, but many walk out with questions that science can't answer, about love, betrayal, and responsibility. Every case begins the same way. A claim, a denial, a story that unfolds like a tangle of human emotion. But behind every plea lies something deeper, a search for belonging, for identity, or sometimes for freedom from guilt. Judge Lake stands at that intersection with both firmness and empathy, her role demanding not only a knowledge of statutes and evidence, but a profound understanding of the concept of justice in jurisprudence. She knows that justice isn't just about punishment or proof, it's about healing. And that's why her courtroom feels more like a confessional than a battlefield. There are people who come to her court because they need a name on a birth certificate. Others come because they need peace of mind. But when the truth finally emerges, when the DNA test strips away the lies and illusions, many realize that people regret taking the test not because they feared the science, but because they feared what it would expose about themselves. In the age of viral stories and reality clips, episodes like these are watched by millions, discussed on shows like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast or the Divorce Course podcast, where legal experts and advocates dissect every moment to explore how ordinary lives collide with extraordinary legal questions. But in the quiet hum of Judge Lake's courtroom, it's not entertainment, it's life. A mother standing alone with her bobbies, a father uncertain of his reflection in a child's eyes, or a partner discovering that loyalty is not always measured by love. Each testimony reveals something sacred and fragile, the human need to be believed. When the case titled More Than a Friend, the father reached Judge Lake's courtroom, it carried all the elements of modern tragedy. Love turned transactional, friendship turned conflict, and innocence trapped in the middle. A young woman, Miss Mayo, claimed that her friend, Mr. Brown, was the father of her twin Bobbies. He denied it, insisting she had trapped him, that he never wanted children. Their story was not about marriage or commitment, but about a relationship without boundaries, without protection, and without understanding of consequence. To the casual viewer, it was another paternity case. But to Judge Lake, It was a reflection of how fragile responsibility has become in a world where intimacy is treated like a temporary contract. Mr. Brown claimed he was deceived. Miss Mayo claimed she was abandoned. And as the evidence stage unfolded, each document, each message, and each tear became a piece of something much larger, a story of two people unprepared for the truth that would follow them long after the courtroom lights faded. What makes these moments powerful isn't just the law, it's the humanity behind it. The judge's role, in its essence, is not only to interpret statutes, but to restore a sense of order between chaos and compassion. When Judge Lauren Lake reminds her litigants that choices create consequences, she's not just upholding the Evidence Act, she's upholding the delicate architecture of accountability. Because sometimes, the adverse inference in evidence isn't drawn from what's missing in the record, but from what's missing in the heart. When the results were read, the truth hit like a wave. Mr. Brown was the father. The DNA test had spoken, and the courtroom shifted from tension to tears. The mother's pain was visible, not because she won, but because winning meant facing the weight of reality. The father's silence spoke louder than his denials ever had. In that instant, the words "truth changes everything" weren't just a phrase, they were a reckoning. And yet the case didn't end with numbers or percentages. It ended with Judge Lake's steady voice reminding both parties that justice is more than proof, it's participation. A father must now pay child support, not as punishment but as recognition. A mother must continue to raise her children, not in bitterness but in dignity. The system had done its part, but healing would require something no court could order. For every DNA test that confirms paternity, there are others that destroy it. Behind every truth, there's a human cost. On shows like Celebrate Recovery Testimonies, people share how confronting painful truths can lead to redemption. But in court, there's no applause, no tidy ending. Only silence and sometimes a second chance. Judge Lake's courtroom becomes a reflection of that paradox. Here, evidence is sacred, but empathy is indispensable. The law can compel a man to pay, but it cannot compel him to love. It can define a father, but it cannot define what fatherhood means. That's why many who appear before her leave transformed, not just by the outcome, but by the perspective. As she often reminds her audience on legal discussions and family law podcasts, the law decides what's right. Justice decides what's fair, and life decides what's possible. There's a broader truth hidden within these cases, one that even the Supreme Court acknowledges in complex family disputes. DNA is definitive, but justice is interpretive. The science may be absolute, but the impact is emotional, cultural, and moral. The concept of justice in jurisprudence requires that even when the facts are clear, the human dimension is not ignored. Miss Mayo's case symbolized more than a dispute over paternity. It represented a generation's struggle with accountability. A world where intimacy has become impulsive and consequence feels negotiable. The DNA test, in this context, becomes a modern confessional, a place where people face not just biological truth but moral clarity. It's easy to judge from the outside, to label the mother desperate or the father irresponsible. But when Judge Lake speaks, the courtroom listens, not because of her authority, but because of her humanity. Her words bridge the gap between the rigid structure of law and the fluid nature of justice. Her tone carries both strength and empathy, reminding everyone that even in moments of failure, redemption is possible. Some cases remind her of adoption stories she's encountered in full episodes dedicated to family reunions, stories where the search for identity spans decades, and DNA becomes the bridge between strangers who share blood but not history. Those stories, like the ones in her courtroom, always circle back to the same truth, that knowing where you come from changes where you're going. Behind the legal drama, there's also a philosophical layer that legal scholars love to explore on platforms like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast. They discuss how each ruling reveals a subtle tension between the letter of the law and the spirit of justice. The courtroom, in their view, is not just a venue for judgment. It's a living experiment in jurisprudence, where compassion meets codification. In Judge Lake's world, that experiment plays out daily. Every ruling is a chance to balance empathy with order, heart with reason. The law may demand restitution, but justice demands reflection. There's an emotional rhythm that runs through these cases, a pattern of heartbreak and revelation. When people take a DNA test, they expect certainty, but they rarely anticipate the emotional earthquake that follows. Some discover fidelity, others discover betrayal. Many confess quietly that they regret taking the test, not because they doubt the results, but because the truth forces them to confront their own failings. And yet, that's precisely where recovery begins. To celebrate recovery, as countless testimonies echo, one must first face the truth. Judge Lake's courtroom is the crucible where that transformation begins. She doesn't just deliver verdicts, she delivers awakenings. The truth, once revealed, doesn't always heal immediately. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, it often cuts before it cures. The DNA envelope may close the chapter legally, but emotionally, it opens 1,000 more. When the results are read aloud, "You are the father," the words hang in the air like a confession whispered into eternity. Everyone in the room feels it. The litigants, the families, even the viewers watching at home on episodes discussed later in podcasts like the Divorce Course podcast or the Game-Changing Attorney podcast. The reaction isn't about science anymore. It's about humanity facing itself. Because the truth doesn't just change everything, it demands everything. Judge Lake knows that justice, like life, is complicated. She's seen men collapse into tears of relief, women exhale decades of pain, and children finally understand who they are. But she's also seen anger, regret, silence so thick it feels like judgment itself. Every DNA case becomes a moral mirror, a reflection of what happens when responsibility is postponed, when love is taken for granted, and when intimacy becomes a gamble. The relationship between law and justice is on full display here. The law provides the tools, statutes, acts, and procedures like the Evidence Act or principles of adverse inference in evidence. But justice asks for something deeper: humanity. It's not enough to prove. One must also understand. In one sense, the courtroom is like a stage. The testimonies are performances of truth, half written by emotion and half governed by logic. But unlike any scripted play, this stage has no rehearsals. Here, the actors are real people. The consequences are irreversible. After each case, Judge Lake's reflections often linger beyond the verdict. She has spoken in interviews and discussions that appear on legal and recovery-focused platforms, like Celebrate Recovery Testimonies, about how truth, though painful, can become the starting point of redemption. Her philosophy is clear. Truth isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of healing. That sentiment echoes through every adoption story she's ever encountered, through every tear shed by someone who learns they're not biologically connected to the parent who raised them, or by a man who discovers he has children he never knew existed. These revelations don't erase the past, they rewrite it. Miss Mayo's story didn't end when she left the courtroom. For her, the DNA confirmation was just the start of a long, lonely road of motherhood. Raising 2 infants, one with special needs, became a daily reminder of both her strength and her mistakes. Yet in every sleepless night, she could recall Judge Lake's words, not as judgment, but as guidance. Don't speak negatively over your children. Speak life. That advice became her anchor. She began to rebuild, not just for her twins, but for herself. Meanwhile, Mr. Brown's story took a different turn. What began as denial slowly transformed into acceptance. The moment he heard, "You are the father," something broke inside him. His defenses, his pride, his excuses. What replaced them was responsibility. The weight of truth became the foundation of change. He didn't just owe money, he owed presence. And as child support payments began, so did visits, attempts, and small gestures of fatherhood. These are the untold chapters that viewers never see, the moments after the credits roll, where people decide whether the truth will ruin them or redeem them. In the world of the Divorce Course podcast, legal analysts often highlight how emotional evidence carries as much power as physical evidence. While the Evidence Act might define relevance and admissibility, Judge Lake defines compassion and accountability. She often reminds litigants that adverse inference applies not just to missing documents, but to missing integrity. Her understanding of justice goes beyond the courtroom. It ventures into the soul. Justice, after all, isn't sterile, it's personal, it's emotional, it's transformative. When Judge Lauren Lake speaks, her tone is never cold or detached. She is both a judge and a teacher, blending legal wisdom with human empathy. She reminds everyone that behind every statute lies a story, behind every file lies a family, and behind every verdict lies a life that must continue after the gavel falls. That's the essence of the concept of justice in jurisprudence. The understanding that the law is not merely an instrument of order, but an instrument of restoration. On one of her most compelling episodes, a man who denied his paternity for 3 years learned through DNA evidence that he was indeed the father. His initial reaction was silence, followed by tears, not of joy but of recognition. He whispered, "I missed everything." That single sentence summarized what thousands of men and women realized too late, that truth doesn't wait for readiness. The court had proven what his heart already knew, and as Judge Lake told him, you can't change the beginning, but you can change the ending. Those words became a Celebrate Recovery testimony in their own right. They traveled beyond the courtroom, shared across communities, faith groups, and podcasts, reminding everyone that accountability is not shame, it's growth. In the grander landscape of justice, cases like these echo the moral framework upheld even in the Supreme Court, that every child deserves identity, care, and truth. DNA doesn't just determine biology, it determines belonging. But in these emotionally charged courtrooms, belonging can feel heavier than proof. Some parents fight to be recognized, others fight to be released. Some families are built through biology, others through choice. That's where adoption stories' full episodes provide a parallel lesson. Many who appear before Judge Lake later become advocates for family awareness and reform. They realize that love is not defined by shared DNA, but by shared responsibility. And yet, without the truth, even love cannot fully stand. The viewers who follow these stories, often through channels that explore family law and relationships, see more than just drama. They see a reflection of modern society, where commitment is fragile, truth is deferred, and emotional maturity is often optional. But they also see something else: redemption. Every time Judge Lake asks a mother or father to face the truth, she isn't tearing them down. She's inviting them to rebuild. Every "you are the father" is both a declaration and an opportunity. Every "you are not the father" is a release and a warning. Because whether the results bring relief or ruin, the DNA test remains the ultimate truth teller, a silent witness that neither lies nor flatters. There's a recurring theme in these cases that aligns with deeper legal philosophy. It's the relationship between law and justice, the space between what's enforceable and what's right. The law can establish paternity, justice can restore fatherhood. The law can issue child support, justice can inspire emotional support. The law can end a relationship, justice can begin reconciliation. And in that balance, Judge Lake stands as both an interpreter of the law and a guardian of grace. For many who have appeared before her, the courtroom became a sacred threshold. They entered with denial and left with direction. Some even found purpose beyond the pain, sharing their experiences through community forums, parenting groups, and podcasts about recovery and transformation. In these platforms, people confess that what began as humiliation became a kind of spiritual awakening. The same DNA test that once caused fear became the turning point towards self-respect. It's no wonder that so many legal and personal growth podcasts, from the Game-Changing Attorney podcast to the Divorce Course podcast, have discussed Judge Lake's impact. They describe her as a bridge between law and life, between evidence and empathy. The irony, however, is that the very same DNA tests that bring truth also expose deceit. Entire subgenres of online discussions revolve around DNA test cheating stories, accounts of betrayal that unravel families, friendships, and reputations. These stories, though sensational, carry moral weight. They remind viewers that cheating isn't just an act, it's an erosion of trust. And once trust is broken, even truth feels like punishment. Judge Lake often addresses this with unflinching honesty. If you don't want the truth to destroy your life, don't live a lie. Her words pierce not because they are harsh, but because they are true. Truth, as she sees it, is the foundation of both recovery and justice. Without truth, love is unstable and law becomes meaningless. In every Celebrate Recovery testimony, truth is the first step toward redemption. In every adoption story, truth is the bridge between past and future. In every divorce case, truth is the threshold of closure. That's why Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom matters. It's where the science of DNA meets the soul of humanity. It's where evidence meets emotion, and where the relationship between law and justice is not theoretical but visible. She often ends her rulings with compassion rather than condemnation. Her tone shifts from firm to hopeful, from legal to lyrical. She encourages fathers to step up, mothers to heal, and children to know they are loved. In one memorable reflection, she said, "The law tells us what we must do, justice tells us what we should do, but love tells us what we are capable of doing." That quote has since become a touchstone for countless fans who watch her show, study her rulings, or reference her wisdom in classroom debates on the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Because beneath every judgment lies a lesson, not just for the litigants but for all of us. By the end of More Than a Friend, The Father, viewers weren't just witnessing another case, they were witnessing transformation. They saw that the court, often viewed as a cold institution, could also be a place of grace. They saw how one woman's pain and one man's denial could turn into a joint commitment to truth. When the courtroom empties and the cameras stop rolling, the echo of truth lingers. The seats cool, the air settles, and yet the words of Judge Lauren Lake continue to resonate like scripture. In her world, the DNA test isn't the climax, it's the catalyst. Because while science may confirm paternity, it's courage that confirms character. Her courtroom is where the concept of justice in jurisprudence takes human form, where the abstract becomes emotional and the procedural becomes personal. It's where people arrive seeking proof, but leave seeking peace. And what makes these stories timeless isn't the verdict, it's the transformation that follows. For Miss Mayo and Mr. Brown, that transformation didn't end with the results. It began with them. She learned that motherhood is both a calling and a challenge, that strength isn't measured by applause but by endurance. He learned that fatherhood isn't determined by a lab, it's proven in presence. The court's judgment required him to pay child support, but the silent judgment of conscience required him to grow. This is where the difference between law and justice becomes clear. Law enforces payment. Justice inspires participation. Law punishes neglect. Justice cultivates care. In that subtle divide lies the heart of Lauren Lake's courtroom. The world beyond her bench mirrors her message. On platforms like the Divorce Course podcast and the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, experts often analyze her cases, not for entertainment, but for insight into how truth changes everything. They talk about how a single test can realign entire families, how evidence can dismantle denial, and how confronting one's actions can become the purest form of recovery. Episodes dissecting her rulings reveal something profound. In every case, there's a sermon about responsibility disguised as a